And the US actor Luke Perry has died days after suffering a massive stroke. The 52-year-old was best known for starring as Dylan McKay in Beverly Hills' 90210 and as Fred Andrews more recently on the TV show Riverdale. Plenty more still to come on the programme, including Germany decides it will strip dual nationality citizens of their German citizenship if they went to fight for ISIS. We will be live in Berlin. Plus, has Canada had enough of Justin Trudeau? Find out why the Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister, is in hot water politically. And could this finally be the year where electric cars become popular with buyers? Jeremy Wilkes will be at the Geneva Motor Show to tell us. Before that, though, a no comment. It comes from Spain and from Asturias, where wildfires have been raging for a second day there.
Good Morning Europe, coming up on Euronews.
This Thursday on Euronews.
Passion drives our lives and inspires the world's finest artists. Musica brings you the brightest stars. From iconic theatres, watch brilliant conductors, famous soloists and sensational opera singers. Musica with passion on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Musica is proudly presented by Rolex.
Euronews Now with Tokunbo Solako, weekdays on Euronews.
Reminder of our top stories this morning. French President Emmanuel Macron calls for urgent European changes to stop member states retreating into nationalism. A dilemma for Europe's biggest political group. Does it expel Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's party at a time when it needs Fidesz's voting power? And returning home to a hero's welcome. Venezuela's self-declared interim president defies a travel ban in his bid to oust incumbent Nicolas Maduro. Welcome back. Germany says it will strip dual nationals who fight for ISIS and other terrorist groups of their German citizenship. The new law is the latest move by Western governments to deal with the threat posed by homegrown Islamic terrorists and radicals. And to get the details on it, I'm joined now by Jessica Solz in Berlin. Jessica, morning to you. Now, the idea of how to deal with fighters returning from Syria is an issue that's affecting many countries. How is Germany dealing with it?
Well, Belle, to date, German nationals could only have their citizenship stripped if they travelled abroad to engage in combat in foreign armed forces without German consent. But the German government has now decided to extend this legislation to expatriate German citizens who travel abroad to engage in combat on behalf of a terror militia, for example, the so-called Islamic State group. group. This was something that was announced yesterday by Interior Minister Horst Seehofer and Justice Minister Katharina Barley. Now, this new law means that German citizens who are over 18 years old who go abroad to fight on behalf of an identified terror group and who have dual nationality can have their German citizenship stripped. Now, this is something that the German government announced yesterday. It believes will be a preventative measure, that it will discourage German citizens from now on travelling abroad to fight on behalf of terror groups, and they believe that it is a symbolic step in trying to combat terror.
Jessica, this new legislation has been the cause of some controversy. Why is that?
Well, Belle, for many people here in Germany, including many critics within the Conservative and the Liberal parties, this is really too little too late. This is something that was discussed as far back by German politicians in 2015. Since then, an estimated 1,050 German nationals have travelled abroad to Syria and Iraq to fight on behalf of the Islamic State. So it's believed that had this legislation been brought in sooner, then an estimated 200 German nationals with dual nationality would have been able to have their citizenship stripped already over the past couple of years. Now, the problem with this legislation being brought in now is that it cannot be enforced retrospectively, meaning that it cannot be enforced on German nationals returning to Germany who have been fighting on behalf of the Islamic State, and it also does not affect the around 100 German citizens who are currently incarcerated in Syria and Iraq. Now, on the other side of the German political spectrum, from the Green Party and the left-wing party Die Linke, they are also criticising this new legislation because they believe that this is Germany just trying to absolve itself of the problem of dealing with German nationals committing crimes abroad. The head of the Linke party, Bernd Rötzinger, yesterday said if German nationals are committing crimes, even if it is on behalf of a terror group, these are still German nationals, many of whom were encouraged to enter into terrorism when they're on German ground. These are people who were brought up in Germany and who were indoctrinated in Germany and went abroad to fight. So many of German politicians from the left-wing side of the political spectrum saying that Germans shouldn't be absolving themselves of the problem. These people who have been fighting abroad for terror groups should be brought back to Germany and face justice here.
Jessica, thank you very much. Jessica Saltz there in Berlin. Still to come on the programme here, the trouble facing Canada's Justin Trudeau. We will have the latest on the SNC-Lavalin scandal and why it matters after the break.
Good Morning Europe, coming up on Euronews.
reminder of our top story this morning. It's time for a European renewal. So says Emmanuel Macron in an open letter penned ahead of the EU elections in May. The French president made the case for a united Europe in the face of Brexit and populist pressures. And he warned that the union is in danger of sleepwalking through a diminished Europe. Welcome back. Now, in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau seems to be in deep political trouble ahead of October's general election. The incident that's engulfed his government for the past few weeks revolves around an engineering firm facing corruption charges linked to the Gaddafi regime in Libya. Trudeau's former Attorney General is now saying that she was pressured by the Prime Minister to take a more lenient stance with the case. She resigned last month, and now a second key minister has also resigned, citing a lack of confidence in the government. Joining me now to talk a little bit more about this is Shachi Curl, the Executive Director of the polling agency Angus Reid Institute. She joins us from Vancouver in Canada. Good morning, Ms. Curl. Thanks for joining us. Now, for our European and global audience, just give us a little bit more context here about what it is that Justin Trudeau is in trouble about, what he's being accused of, and why it could end up being such a political problem for him.
In essence, Belle, and good morning, the issue for Justin Trudeau is that he campaigned 3.5 years ago on a promise of doing politics very differently. He promised to do politics in a cleaner, more transparent, more supportive way to women, in a more supportive way to Canada's Indigenous populations. He promised to be Mr. Squeaky Clean and to do politics in a way that would be far more open than what we have been used to seeing in this country. So the issue is not so much of either small or soft C corruption, but really of not living up to the own promises that he campaigned on and that he made for his own party and for his own comportment and behavior. Fast forward 3.5 years, he's really turned out to be, in the perception of many Canadians, according to our polling, a politician who is very much in the same vein as every other politician who has been in charge of our country, Canada, or indeed of many of the OECD countries. That is not necessarily corrupt, but playing the political game, which is what he promised not to do. So here you have the initial resignation of a key cabinet minister, the former Attorney General, Minister of Justice, who was not only a woman, and remember Prime Minister Trudeau promised to be a champion of women in this country, but also a woman of the Indigenous community, a First Nations woman, at a time where Canada is trying to grapple with and come to terms with its own checkered past on its history, its relationships with First Nations communities. So when you have a politician like Justin Trudeau, who has communicated very much in the currency of symbols, not necessarily on what he's done, but on what he says he is going to do, and then you have a discrepancy or a gap between what he says he's going to do and what he actually does, therein lies the problem. It's a very Canadian problem to have, and yet it is one that Canadians are watching very closely.
And certainly that might be recognisable elsewhere as well. Now, the Conservative opposition in Canada is calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. In your polling, do you think there's appetite for it to go that far, for Justin Trudeau to step down?
At the moment, the wide view is that Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals, as a result, have scored an own goal, if you will. So this isn't so much a matter of offense from the opposing party or the opposing team, but a failure to play defense. Again, the problem for Mr. Trudeau is that he has failed to live up to his own promises. And so obviously, not surprisingly, we see an uptick in support for the opposition parties, including the right of center Conservative Party. But you have to remember, insofar as where parties sit on the spectrum in Canada relative to Europe or other parts of the world, the Conservative Party is still a fairly center centre-right party. It's not an extreme right party. So you've got the Conservative leader, Andrew Scheer, saying, Mr. Trudeau, resign. You've got the left of centre, New Democrat leader, a gentleman named Jagmeet Singh, also saying resign. Justin Trudeau has said, you know what, I am not going to resign. We are in an election year in Canada. We expect an election to be called in October of this year. So we are 7 to 6 months out from an election. And the Prime Minister has made it very clear voters will make their choice in 6 months. He may be banking on. Yeah, Justin Trudeau may well be banking on the fact that people will have forgotten about this in 6 months. But of course, the resignation of a senior minister, a key, trusted, seemingly able minister of his own cabinet today, as
that is if Justin Trudeau gets to October. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but we are out of time. Shachi Curl there, Executive Director of the polling agency Angus Reid Institute. Thank you for joining us. Still to come here on the programme, the future is electric at the Geneva Car Show. I was there yesterday afternoon. Jeremy Wilkes is there this morning. We'll be hearing from him.
Tradition older than time. A sea of humanity, united in conviction. A journey to find yourself. Take the leap and experience infinity. Kumbh, come, live the spectacle.
Incredible India.
Good Morning Europe, coming up on Euronews.
This week on Euronews.
Boston, the birthplace of the American Revolution, is the next stop for French musician Letitia Sherif on her American journey. Join her on the famous Freedom Trail along iconic landmarks of American history and step on board a naval legend, the USS Constitution, before she tastes a New England speciality, the lobster roll. That's notes from the USA this week on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Welcome back to the newsroom. Now, the International Geneva Motor Show has gotten underway this week. Some of the world's most innovative and imaginative cars can be seen there. Our correspondent Jeremy Wilkes is there. He joins us now from the car show in Geneva. Jeremy, how much has there been a push this year towards electric vehicles?
Well, we've seen that trend coming for a long time, haven't we? The electric vehicles, and we saw it in various prototypes, but we're starting to see it in real models you can imagine seeing in the streets and driving around near you. So it's definitely a trend that is happening. It's here for good. The other thing, of course, at Geneva is that you always see these cars that make you dream, and whereas 10 years ago, the cars like the one that looked like the one behind me might have had a V12 petrol engine in them, these are now electric. This is the Pininfarina Battista, from Automobili Pininfarina. It just was released and presented to the public last night. This is the first time it's been live on TV. 1,900 bhp on this vehicle, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in under 2 seconds. To give you a bit of an idea, my family car's got 130 bhp. This says 1,900. It gives you an idea of what it's like, and it's electric. So, you know, the reason people come to places places like Geneva, especially this show, is that they have these niche manufacturers. They're only making 150 of these, and you can come and see them and you can dream. And as I say, you're not dreaming about a V12 anymore, you're dreaming about an electric car. But really the trend wider that you see here is towards electric more generally. For example, from Volkswagen and Peugeot, the vehicles that they're going to be presenting today will be vehicles which are based on platforms that you can have a petrol engine on, a diesel engine and an electric engine. So it's for the consumer then to choose what kind of driving do they do, how do they move around, are they in the city, do they like to go longer distances, and then to choose the right engine to go with them. But almost everybody's bringing on electric technology, and really that's driven by legislation too, because the European rules coming online next year mean that across the fleet of an entire manufacturer they need to have fewer than 95 grams per kilometre in their emissions. And so they need to have electric technology on board in order to meet those figures.
Jeremy, what are the other big highlights for you looking ahead this year?
I think the big topic that a lot of the bosses we're going to be talking to today are going to be worried about, concerned about and debating is Brexit, because of course the UK is a major manufacturer. It's also a major market for German cars, for example, but an awful lot of cars are made in the UK and 80% of them are exported. We hear this phrase frictionless trade. Well, the car industry needs frictionless trade. It's sending engines across the English Channel all the time between different manufacturers trading parts, and they're stockpiling. Some of them are even kind of closing down their factories for a little while at the end of this month. Some of them are stockpiling parts. So it's going to be interesting to talk to some of the bosses. We'll be talking to the boss of Aston Martin later today. We'll be talking to the boss of Citroën later today. We're talking to people from all kinds of manufacturers about Brexit and how they see the market developing in the UK and also how they see production. Because as I say, this just-in-time manufacturing has really been embraced by the car industry over the last 30 years or so, and certainly in the last 20 years, and they rely on frictionless trade, and they want to have a plan 5 years ahead about where are they going to be with Brexit. And so there'll be a lot of debate amongst the men and women in suits here about that. And for those of us who just love cars, well, Geneva's great, as I say, because it's full of small manufacturers, tuning companies who make cars that you hardly ever see, that are just make you, I just say wow. Often when I come to Geneva, I love seeing the cars because it's so different to other car shows. You've got, all these little brands that you just don't see anywhere else.
Jeremy, thanks very much. Jeremy Wilkes there at the Geneva Car Show. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Remember, top stories are on Euronews.com. And a comment for you as we leave, which is from the US, where drivers captured an avalanche roaring down a mountainside in Colorado.
Oh, no, that's not going to come down here, is it?
No, that is.
Is it? Now I'm slowing down.
Yeah, over that car right now.
It ain't gonna come this way, is it?
On Euronews.
Sustainable architecture, thanks to 3D printers. We'll be looking at one Dutch company betting on this shift in the way we build. That's coming up next in Smart Regions.
Euronews.com.
This Saturday on Euronews.
We are here in the Netherlands to discover a European network that coaches entrepreneurs. The objective is to help get them funding, to innovate and to access new markets internationally. The formula works very well. The power of the network is this week on Business Planet on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Good Morning Europe, coming up on Euronews.
Buildings covered with sails. Just one of the many creative ideas coming out of Dutch architectural firm Actuel. Backed by the EU's cohesion policy, the startup offers sustainable building solutions.
There's no sun now, but the sun can go through, creating a reflection on the inside. At the same time, this digital design can be altered in the computer based on your geolocation. You can make tailor-made design on a mass scale.